There are places in this world that are supposed to feel safe, places where darkness isn't welcome, where whatever lurks in the shadows is kept at bay by something greater. Churches are supposed to be those places, houses of God, sanctuaries. But what happens when something follows you inside? What happens when the darkness doesn't stop at the door? These are three real stories, three people who walked into a church looking for peace and walked out with something they could never explain. You are listening to Night Whispers, where every whisper tells a story. Sarah had not been inside a church in 11 years, not since her mother died on a gray Wednesday morning and took Sarah's faith with her on the way out. She had tried going back once after the funeral, sat in the same pew, smelled the same smells, waited for something to return. Nothing did. She never went again. 11 years later, on a Tuesday evening in late October, she was walking home from work when the rain started, cold and sudden. She ducked under the nearest awning and looked up to find herself standing outside St. Augustine's Cathedral, a building she had walked past 100 times without ever going in. Something about it had always made her keep moving. That evening, she didn't keep moving. She pushed open the heavy door and stepped inside. The interior was almost completely dark, a few candles near the altar, the smell of old wood and cold stone, and something else underneath that she had no word for. The silence had weight, the kind that accumulates over centuries. She sat in one of the back pews, and for a few minutes it actually helped. The tightness in her chest loosened slightly. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, she noticed the confession booths along the left wall, all curtains closed except one. The furthest booth, its curtain open just slightly, moving slowly, rhythmically, like something breathing just behind the fabric. She told herself it was a draft. She almost believed it, until she heard the voice. Low at first, almost below hearing, a pattern of syllables repeated over and over with mechanical patience. She leaned forward, gripped the cold wood of the pew in front of her, focused everything she had, and the words became clear. Her name, just her name, whispered over and over from somewhere that seemed to have no single location, that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Sarah, Sarah, Sarah. She was moving before she decided to move, across the stone floor toward the exit, footsteps too loud, echoing upward into the dark above her. She told herself not to run. Her hand found the iron door handle, cold and heavy. She gripped it and pushed. The voice spoke directly into her left ear, so close she felt the warmth of breath against her skin. Sarah, don't leave yet. She ran. Her next clear memory was 3 blocks away, under a streetlight, soaked through, hands on her knees, chest heaving. She never went back to St. Augustine's. She constructed a rational explanation and held on to it firmly. But for 6 weeks after that evening, she woke at exactly 3 a.m. every night to the sound of her name being whispered from somewhere inside her apartment she could never locate, from somewhere that moved when she moved, that followed her from room to room until just before dawn. Then one night, it simply stopped. She still walks past St. Augustine's every day on her way home. She never goes in. But sometimes on cold October evenings, she slows down slightly as she passes the door, and she feels it, that quiet gravity, pulling. She never stops walking.
Marcus was a man who didn't believe in things he couldn't explain. He was practical and grounded and quietly skeptical of anything supernatural. He had been this way his entire life, and it had served him well. He was 41 when he took the weekend groundskeeping job at St. Peter's Church, maintaining the grounds, clearing the pathways through the small cemetery at the rear of the property. Solitary work that suited him perfectly. For 3 months, nothing unusual happened. Then came the Saturday in November he has never been able to account for. He arrived at 7 in the morning, cold, gray sky that never brightened. He started in the oldest section of the cemetery as usual, working his way through headstones worn smooth by a century and a half of weather, names becoming suggestions of names. He was halfway through the oldest section when he noticed the figure. A man standing at the far corner of the cemetery, back to Marcus, facing one of the oldest headstones, completely still. Marcus assumed someone visiting a grave. He went back to his work. 20 minutes later, the figure had not moved, not even slightly. No shifting of weight, no adjustment of posture. The complete motionlessness of something not subject to the ordinary discomforts of standing still in cold weather. Marcus walked toward him slowly, and as he got closer, he noticed the coat, long and black and heavy, the cut of it belonging to a different century entirely, the wide-brimmed hat, not a costume, genuinely old. The fabric catching the gray morning light in a way that made it look less solid than it should. "Excuse me, are you all right?" Nothing, no response, no acknowledgement, as if Marcus had not spoken, as if Marcus was not there. He kept walking, the gravel loud under his boots, everything else silent. No birds, no traffic, no wind, just the sound of his own footsteps getting closer to something every instinct he had was telling him to walk away from. "Excuse me, sir." The head began to turn, slowly, with a deliberateness that had nothing natural in it. The turn of something that had been waiting for him to get close enough, that had known he was there from the very beginning. Marcus has told this story twice. Both times he stopped at the same moment. Both times he said only this: the man in the old black coat had no eyes, just smooth, pale skin where his eyes should have been, featureless, like a face left unfinished, like something made to look at things without being looked back at. And he was smiling. Marcus left his tools where they were and drove home without calling anyone. He sat in his parked car in his own driveway for 2 hours. He never returned to St. Peter's Church. He never worked in a cemetery again. But sometimes, on cold, gray November mornings, he thinks about that corner of the cemetery, about the headstone the figure was facing, about whose name might be on it. He has never gone back to find out. Diane was 12 years old when she understood that music could be something more than sound, something with presence, with intention. She had been singing in the junior choir at her local church since she was 8. It was the one place she felt completely herself. She loved the acoustics of the choir room, the way the high ceiling held the voices a fraction too long before releasing them, like the room was reluctant to let the sound go. On a Sunday evening in early December, the choir director asked Diane to stay late to organize sheet music for the Christmas program. Her parents would collect her in an hour. The other children left. The director stepped out to speak with the pastor. The door clicked shut. Diane was alone. She worked steadily through the stacks of loose pages, the only sounds, the whisper of paper, and the quiet settling of the old building around her. Ordinary sounds. She was perhaps 15 minutes in when she heard it. A voice, singing, soft and unhurried, a melody she had never heard before, something older than anything in the Christmas program. Something that felt like it had been going on long before she started listening to it. She looked around the room, every chair empty, every corner visible. No one,
But the singing continued, clear and immediate, like someone standing right beside her. She stood completely still, frightened but unable to move, unable to stop listening. And slowly, as she focused on the voice, she understood something that made the fear become something colder and more complete. The voice was singing her part. Not just the same melody, her exact part, the specific notes assigned to her alone, the particular phrasing her choir director had spent months teaching her, the precise breath placements she had only recently gotten right, every individual detail of the way Diane specifically sang every Sunday morning, as if something had been sitting in that room for months, listening, learning, waiting for the evening she would finally be alone. The singing stopped the instant the door opened. The choir director took one look at Diane's face and crossed the room immediately. Diane pointed at the far corner, the darkest one, the one the light never fully reached. The director went pale. She sat down slowly and told Diane something she had never told any of the children before. 14 years ago, the woman who directed the choir before her had died in this room, alone, unexpectedly. She had given 30 years of her life to the music and the children and that room, had told people in her final months that she could never imagine truly leaving, that she intended to keep listening as long as there was anything to listen to. Diane never came back to that church. She is an adult now. She rarely speaks about that December evening, but sometimes, late at night when the house is completely quiet, she hears it again, drifting through her bedroom, that old, patient melody, beautiful and wrong in equal measure. She lies still and waits for it to stop. It always does, eventually. She has never decided whether that is comforting or not. These three people walked into churches looking for something ordinary. What they found was a reminder that some places do not release what they accumulate, that walls absorb more than cold and damp, that some spaces become so saturated with the lives lived intensely within them that the boundary between what remains and what should have gone becomes uncertain, permanently and completely uncertain. Sarah still doesn't know what was in the confession booth. Marcus still doesn't know whose grave the figure was standing over. Diane still doesn't know whether the voice loved the music or loved her specifically, whether it is still there, whether it is still listening. What they know is only this: they walked in as one version of themselves, they walked out as another, and the change has never stopped. Some doors once opened will not fully close. Some whispers once heard do not stop when the room goes quiet. If you have ever experienced something in a place that was supposed to keep you safe, share your story in the comments below, because the darkness gathers witnesses everywhere, even in the places built specifically to keep it out. And at Night Whispers, the darkness always has more witnesses than you think.